Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life friends. Justin here. Today I have a great guest on this show. His name's Jeremy. And Jeremy, for those of you who haven't listened to our podcast in the past, he has been on with me before. But Jeremy actually is kind of my brother.
Yeah.
But kind of not my brother. So my mom previously was married to his dad in a past life. And his dad and him had disappeared out of her world. And later on, she ended up reconnecting with Jeremy. Facebook. And we ended up becoming friends. And it felt like I had met my long lost brother. My older brother I never had.
Same.
And so Jeremy and I have been on a really great journey together. And he started a men's group called Wild Courage. And Wild Courage has become something that has deeply impacted a lot of men who are your manly men, a lot of them, that normally wouldn't find themselves stepping foot inside of the emotional health space. I say manly men, but I don't know how else would you put it? Like,
yeah, it's interesting. There's like a lot of cowboys and outdoorsmen and guys that maybe wouldn't go to church or be in touch with the emotional side of things. And basically what we do is give them permission because somebody's got to go first.
Yeah.
So if you have a big beard and show up and cry, they're like, oh, wow, maybe I should look into this also.
Yeah, it's cool because like the archetype, at least from the group of men initially that you started pulling, was that because you are part of that, the cowboy crowd and stuff like that. And I found it so fascinating to see guys who, you know, are wearing Carhartts and dipping tobacco and all dirty, being like, oh, it's okay for me to have emotions and feel.
Yeah, it's been crazy. And it like any great thing though, if you take risk, right, and show up and be like, get to a healthy enough place where you're like, I don't really care what anyone thinks about me because I'm secure enough in being a man and the things that I've done and are doing that I'm going to show up to this space and be emotional if I need to be emotional. And just to see, again, the permission that it gives other guys to be like, because what you can't do is argue with the fruit in another man's life.
That's true.
So I think that's what resonates. Yeah, it's the results.
You see the result and you go, okay, then I have to quit denying this part of my human experience as a man and be willing to do this if I want those results.
Yeah.
Because I want to keep my marriage. I'd like to keep my kids inside of my life. I'd like to repair those relationships, right?
Yeah, and it's fascinating, Justin. The thing that I hear the most often, like we just are out of a retreat that we just had, and the common theme is I just told something to this small group of men that I thought would take to my grave, and the shame that comes with that, and creating a vulnerable, safe place where guys can show up and let that little broken boy peek out and be like, man, I've experienced some really hard things. And I've just found that, especially because the first time I ever told my story was with you in the same building.
Yeah.
And how scared I was because my story is one of a lot of sexual abuse and physical and emotional abuse. Yeah. And the permission then that's given to men, especially I have a heart for the cowboy community because that's the community in which I grew up in and spent my whole life in. The amount of men that have reached out to me and said, I didn't know it was okay to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And some of that same thing that happened to you happened to me. Mm-hmm. And just to get to be a safe, soft place for guys in their story to land with that is like such an honor but you can't be that place if you haven't done the work and
it's true.
Got the healing and went and, I think about our time together before podcast or any of that. And I wouldn't be able to do that hadn't I went in and did the work that I did that you did in my life and in my marriage.
Yeah.
and then get to show up this healthier version and say, look, I haven't got anything figured out.
Yeah.
But I do know that if you say yes to the scary, hard things and deal with the pain and the unprocessed pain that we all
Yeah.
experience, there's hope on the other side of that fear of really, truly being seen.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I actually love about the name Wild Courage is that, you know, we're highlighting courage itself. And I think that what we as men, a lot of us don't understand that some of the most courageous things that we can do is facing these internal fears that we've been running from our entire lives, right? And to bring down my walls and allow myself to cry, or to allow men to see these broken parts of me that feel broken, the little boy that feels broken inside of me. I mean, that is some intense, courageous work that we're doing. It's very easy to harden our hearts. It's easy to act as if nothing's wrong and nothing affects me. I can go and live out a full life under the illusion that nothing impacts me and nothing affects me. But it's just that. It is an utter illusion, and it's rooted in my personal fear of having to face some of my greatest pains and greatest hurdles of my past that I just want to bury and, like you said, take to our grave. And so I love the name of it. I love what it says to people, because a lot of guys perceive that they're living a lifestyle of courage and bravery, but when the rubber hits the road, they're actually really terrified little boys. And that's not a disparaging comment. We all have been there as terrified little boys who are running from things that feel so much bigger than us. And so I love the work that you're doing inside of it.
Well, thanks. It's honoring, and it's fun because of the men that I run with and get to do it with. And they're all a slice of the Father that I don't have. And so when you surround yourself with wildly courageous, badass dudes,
Yeah,
that are in the journey themselves, I get to become a better husband and father because of the men that I run with. And I tell guys this all the time, because this thing started spreading. Like, if Wild Courage was a three-legged stool, it would be the podcast, obviously, which is just stories of hope and redemption. I just recognized early on, like, even in church, like, I don't remember any sermons, but I remember when people would come and tell these wild, crazy testimonies.
yeah,
And there's something hopeful in it. So I found in sharing my story with you the first time that it resonated with a lot of people, right? Because there's something about us feeling alone in our pain
yeah,
that's unvalidating. And when you share what you're going through and what you've been through and how that you've been through the other side of it, it sometimes puts language to something in our soul that we've felt for a very long time but didn't know how to articulate. And being seen, even in hearing somebody else's story, is so powerful. And we started finding this, and that's what the podcast kind of became about, is like, what if I could interview and talk to guys like yourself that have been through something, and you share that experience vulnerably, and the hope that it gives to the guy that's listening and the gal that's like, oh my gosh, that's it.
yes.
I felt that same thing. I didn't know how to articulate it or verbalize it. And there's the hope part of the redemption part of it, of like, they've walked through it and they're on the other side of this. They haven't arrived, and they're still processing and still in the journey, because we never arrive at it.
Totally.
And then before that was just me and my buddies sitting around and like, I'm going to take a chance in being honest with you about something, and hanging our heads in that shame, that place of shame,
Totally.
to look up expecting judgment and rejection. Because that's the lie we tell ourselves, that if we're honest with someone and vulnerable, that's what we'll be met with. And to look up and see them weeping over that part of my story and the healing that came in that.
Yeah.
And that started, and then these fires started in my barn. And the short of it is the word kind of got out about it. And now we have fires all over the country Canada.
Which a fire is, and I want to go back to the conversation about story, but I just want to articulate, like, your fires are setting up a fire, like a campfire, a bonfire, something.
Mine's propane, but yeah, because we do it inside in the winter.
Yeah. But it's guys sitting around this space, all just camped out in a meeting and being like, here we are. We're here to share our story. We're here to support each other. We're not here to fix each other.
Yeah. Some of our rules that we've learned over the 4 years, we've had over, I think, 5,000 dudes come to my fire in my barn in Little Emmett, Idaho. No preaching, no teaching, and no advice.
Love it.
Because we get that everywhere we go, right?
Yeah.
Podcasts and church and men's groups and Bible studies. And so it's just a place to come be seen and heard. And the power of it is to watch a guy sit there and have the courage to say, I haven't had sex with my wife in 6 months and I feel so disconnected from her. And watch 4 other guys' heads pop up like, I can't believe he just said something that I'm experiencing also.
Yeah.
And the amount of healing that happens just in hearing that I'm not alone.
Yes.
And there's no judgment. And there's no advice, and there's no 7 steps to freedom and 6 steps to win your wife's heart back. Like, we don't do any of that. And so it's just turned into this place where dudes can come, because I don't know where this is happening outside of this. I'm sure there is, but it doesn't happen at church. And I get that. I'm not dumping on the church. I go to church.
Sure.
But we got to kind of get put together to go to church and have it together. And it doesn't happen at Saturday morning pancake men's breakfast where we just sit there and listen to somebody else tell us their interpretation of some scripture we've heard 1,000 times. Like,
totally.
And again, all that stuff's great, but I've just seen so much healing happen in the space of like, God, here's our mess. Here's our bullshit.
Yep.
Here we are.
Yep.
We're your sons and we're messed up and we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the masculine culture doesn't know how to shut the up and listen, right? You talked about problem solving, and we don't know how to share, but we know how to give advice.
Because we're fixers.
We're fixers, right? A lot of us, like, we're just taught how to fix. And that's great. Like, we absolutely need solutions, and there's times for solutions. But one of the first foundational solutions for us as humans when we're in pain is that idea of like, can I just be heard and know that I'm not alone and know that I'm loved?
And not judged.
And one of the things, I was talking about the idea of story, right? Like you brought up story, and I wanted to circle back to it. But in the context of story, once we understand our story personally, if I can be connected to the reality of my story, I can actually begin to humanize myself, and I can begin to find compassion for my condition. And when you have a series of men all sitting around time after time sharing their story, what you're doing is everyone in the room is beginning to be humanized to one another. And you even if you haven't yet humanized yourself, you start humanizing someone else, some other guy who's sitting there.
Yeah, because you feel compassion for him.
Absolutely. You're like, man, that's messed up. Man, that hurts so bad, especially when a guy breaks and cries and you see that. So what you're fostering is a community of compassion through storytelling.
That's it. And the one thing, Justin, we've gotten really good at is the tension of mourning with those who are mourning and rejoicing with those who are rejoicing, because, and I'm going to be super vague because this space is so confidential, but
and sacred. Yeah.
Let's say a guy just had his 3rd miscarriage.
Yeah.
And where can he take that?
Yeah.
Right. He can bring it to a fire and we'll weep with him. And what we've done is set it up so that you get to show up where you're at and who you are today.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we spend some time like getting real present with where we're at, not where we want to be, not where we were. We take time to get real present.
It's good.
And then we allow that guy that's mourning and we'll weep with that guy. The next guy maybe just had sex with his wife for the first time in 4 months and got a promotion. And as we're wiping away our tears from this guy, we're rejoicing with that guy that he had a breakthrough of some
Cheering
kind.
him on.
Yeah, and like, man, that's awesome. You go and applause or what, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know of any place where we can go and hold that tension, because what happens, and we saw happen early on, was like, if this guy's really bummed out and getting divorced, but I just had a breakthrough, I'm going to shove that down. I'm not going to share where I'm at. And I'm going to be like, oh yeah, my wife and I had a fight the other day too. And because then this compassion thing starts happening, and we limit ourselves to not showing up where we're really at. And that's misfortunate for everyone in the group, because what I've learned in life is only this: it's really messy and it's really beautiful, and it all happens at once.
Yeah.
And let's embrace all of it, because it's the reality of this world we live in. It's really messy and hard, and it's really beautiful at the same time. And so we've gotten really good at holding that tension for you to get to show up right where you're at, no matter what the circumstances your life is going on. And we're going to sit with you in it, whether it's mourning or whether it's rejoicing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a really hard thing. I understand, because if you hear devastating news from one guy and you're like, but I had an amazing week, it's very easy to minimize that. Or it's like, my problem isn't as big as his problem. And it's that comparative suffering thing that kicks in, right?
And we've had to work really hard against that.
Yeah. And I think that's where I could see a lot of difficulty coming in. And I love that that's something you actually address. Like, hey, we got to get rid of comparative suffering in here. Each person's pain is their pain. Each person has a different level of grace for whatever season that they're in.
Yeah, because the other thing that happens too is like, and I struggled with this early on in this because my story's pretty big.
Right.
And I felt like it was minimizing other people, because then they were comparing like, well, my life's not that bad because I didn't experience some of the hard things that you did.
Yeah.
Or anything near that. And so we had to create language to protect that too, because it's relative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, your dad was there every day, but that doesn't mean that he showed up great for you.
Yeah.
Or you grew up with a mom and that guy didn't, or whatever the case may be. And so we really had to foster that environment of like, no, this pain's relative. Like, your story isn't small just because this guy just went through his third divorce and you just had a bad fight with your wife. It's the same. We're going to sit in that with you as well.
Yeah. It's this idea of, I talked about this with a friend the other day. We were discussing the why do things happen, and we can get lost in the why instead of looking at it just is. It just is sad. I don't know why it happened. I can't answer that, but it just is. It just is sad. It just is difficult. It just is that it's a loss, things like that. And one of the things that in context of conversations like this, we have to just begin to say, it just is. It doesn't matter what that guy's story. It just is sad for me. It just is defeating for me. It just is overwhelming for me. It just is what it is for me, regardless of what it looks like to other people, and accepting that this is what it is for me and this is what I'm feeling in this.
Yeah, that's so good, because then we have the opportunity to show up to it differently than trying to figure out why. Mm-hmm. It's like, how am I going to respond to this? Which version of me is going to show up to this?
Yep. And it doesn't matter what anyone else is going through and stuff like that. I'm not here to measure that. I just know that for me, my experience is provoking this type of pain and this type of response inside of me. And that's what matters. And if I can give that attention, I can get the proper healing that I need if I'm not sitting in comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think it works so well. What we've learned at sitting and holding space for guys is just that, because it's like, you get to show up, you get to be wherever you're at. And we don't have any expectation of, look, I'm bummed out for you. Like, why aren't you getting better? Why aren't you? It's like, no, this is just a place where you get to come and be around some guys that aren't going to judge you. Like, we have these agnostic guys that come, which was great
Yeah.
because we have no agenda in it.
Yeah.
Like we pray and we consecrate the night. And like I said, we invite God into the,
Because you guys have you and a lot of your team all have an aspect of faith, right?
oh yeah. And so we invite the Father in, we use that kind of language, and it's not Christianese. Guys are smoking pipes or cigars or having a beer or whatever. And that offends a lot of, we have a lot of one-time Christian guests because of that.
I can't do this.
I've had pastors call me like, I hear about this men's group in Emmett, and what can you tell me about it? I'm like, well, we talk about Jesus. There's some smoking and drinking, and the F word gets said without doubt at least 30 times a night. So I don't know if that's, and then so some people come and it's not for them, and it's fine. It doesn't bother me,
That's not their jam. Yeah.
But these guys that came that are like openly agnostic, which was awesome. And then they signed up for a retreat because we do 2 retreats a year.
Yeah.
And actually they were both at the retreat you were at.
Oh, okay.
In Wyoming. And I said, you kind of know where we stand. Can I ask you why you're coming to this? And they both said separately the same answer. Oh, it's easy. You guys don't judge us. Judge me.
Yeah.
And I feel loved by you.
Yeah. That's it.
And I'm like, so we have this open door policy of like, I don't care where you're at.
Yeah.
It's not a Christian men's club thing. It's not like show up where you're at.
Well, that's the gospel to me.
It is the gospel because we have charismatics, we have Catholics, we have Mormons that come all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're all in this together.
Yeah. We all have different perspectives, but what there is that there's an invitation for encountering our own heart, encountering other men's hearts, and encountering the Father in the love of the Father inside of that space. And that was something that I look at in the life of Jesus, where he was just a living extension of the Father that is continually extending the invitation. He's just saying, hey,
in the humanity.
Yeah. In the midst of the humanity, the midst of the suffering, the trials, the problems, the messiness, hey, just come participate with me. Come sit down with me and we'll just go on this journey. And there's something about, I want to take just a little bunny trail real quick, but the religious institution is like kind of seemingly an invitation, but it stops being an invitation, becomes a demand once you get through the door. An expectation and demand of becoming something, changing, doing all these things, which I believe that when love impacts us, there is a byproduct as our worthiness, our self-value increases, our value for humanity around us. It totally, there is a byproduct that comes out of that, right? And it's natural, and it's a longing for love to be expressed inside of our lives, and health and healing and wholeness, right? But within the institution, there's suddenly a like, here's all the points of how you're supposed to live. Like recently I watched, Russell Brand, he came out having a conversation about his baptism. And it's interesting too, as a side note to this, Russell, I remember when he broke up with, or him and Katy Perry fell apart. I remember feeling internally, it was like a whisper from God saying, I'm going to apprehend his heart one day. And I've sat on that. I've parked on that forever, going like, Russell Brand's going to come out at some point as having an encounter with the love of God. Sure enough, he did, which was exciting for me and cool because I just love the impartation of life that comes out of that. But as he's done that, you watch the explosion of criticism over any aspect of what he says, what he does from within the institutionalized Christianity. And you saw that with Kat Von D when she came out having a conversation. Now, here are 2 public figures who have gone through some of the biggest messiness of life, participated in experiencing all the indulgences that life has to offer, the wealth, the everything, the fame. And the minute that they say yes to this invitation, all of a sudden the institution puts a demand on them to look like something, to look like them, and stuff like that. And I feel like what you're doing is saying, I give you permission to come as you are and to consistently come as you are. And this starts becoming, this is what church in a lot of ways should look like. Hey, we're not lying about the reality of our condition. We are in the midst of our messiness, sharing it without our plastic smiles, bringing ourselves fully and authentically to the table, and supporting one another in the journey to coming alive to love.
Yeah, I think of Kurt Cobain, like, come as you are.
Yeah.
Like, that should have been the church's message.
Yeah.
And that's not what the church is saying. So somebody had to say it.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many miracles happen and God show up, and it's been cool because I've got to do a couple of these retreats with you.
Yeah.
And in the midst of this unreligious ceremonial thing we're doing, to see God show up, and I'm always blown away at how intentional he is coming for his sons in ways that, as much as I say I don't put God in a box, I'm convicted every time we have one of these retreats of how much I still put him in a box.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I would never see God. I would never think that he would show up for that particular guy the way that he did, that could only be impactful and matter to him. And it wasn't anything that because of what we were doing.
Yeah.
Because we don't program him out of it. We're just like, here we are. It's messy.
We don't know what this is going to look like. We're going to let it happen. We're creating the invitation for the space, and we have a yes in our hearts.
The first retreat we did, and he wouldn't mind me sharing this part of it. A guy showed up, and on Sunday we just made space, like, not to validate us, but like, what did you experience? Because our dynamic is small groups, right?
Yeah.
And story. The guy stands up crying, big beard, cowboy, his whole life guy, and said, I met my Savior this weekend. No altar call, no repeat after me prayer.
Yep.
None of the things, Justin, none of them.
Yeah.
None of them happened.
Yep.
And I've watched him 4 years, 3 years later, however long ago that was, like, his life transform, his relationship with God.
Wow.
And he's still never been to church.
Totally.
Like, it messes with my religious thinking of what it's supposed to look like to invite God into a space that doesn't look like what we've grown up in the West, especially, to look like. And that's what we're seeing happen with Russell Brand, is like, anybody that's a searcher. So what I think Russell Brand is like, he's so articulate, so smart.
Yeah.
And he's looking.
Yeah.
He's looking. And
Yeah.
God's not he's not hiding from anyone.
No.
And if you search and knock, you'll find him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look often like the way we think it should. And I think that offends us a lot.
Yes. We get really offended because we have our rules and our systems, and we think this is what it has to look like, as long as I'm within the bounds of rules. I think that, there was that scripture where they talk to Jesus about what is the greatest law, and it's the law of love. And what is love, and what does it practically look like? What does it look like walked out? It is patient and is kind and is gentle and is long suffering. It's like so many aspects of, like, even in these groups with men where you're like, hey, we're available. We're going to be patient with you inside of your process, and we're available right here. We're sitting right down with you every week that you want to participate. We're here to be with you in that process and link arms with you. And that is the law of love in action as you're with it. And I'm sure there's a lot of challenges that happen, like where there are times in relationships where you guys are challenging each other.
All the time. Often. Because something happens when you say yes to this journey, and you get around a bunch of knuckle dragging warriors, and you're in the battle. And what we say all the time is like, I tell guys this all the time, like, we're just not afraid of your mess, any mess.
Yeah.
We'll sit in you with it and we're unfazed by it. Because the guys I run with, we're doing the work continually.
Yeah.
Like I'll reach out to one of the inner circle group of guys that you've got to meet that lead at the retreats. I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, my wife and I are going to counseling. I'm like, what? Still? Or again? Yeah. Like these guys are all on this trajectory of facing all the fears, all the hard things, not settling for like, oh, I guess this is good enough. So when you bring guys into that environment with a bunch of warriors, we're not afraid of Massey. Like there's nothing you can do or say we're not moving. We're not going anywhere. And that creates incredible safety.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I really can tell you this thing that I was going to take to my grave and you're not going to run and you're not going to judge me. And something happens. God shows up in that space of that undoingness, of that laying down of pride and fear and the potential of rejection. Because a lot of times, you've probably experienced this a lot too, is like, people are like, well, I tried vulnerability once, but it was with the wrong person. And then they manipulate and they will use that information and that vulnerability against them. So then we're like, well, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
Because that burned me.
Yeah.
And so it's like trying to undo some of that and like, no, it's okay.
Yeah. No, we're not going to do that. And it's okay. You know, you can watch it walked out. One of the things that I was thinking about, going back to that concept of challenge. So I believe that first off, wholeness and freedom are contagious. And they're something that when we get a taste of it, we start getting ravenous for it. Like we want more of it. I want to be more alive. I want to have more hope. I want to be more happy and more joyful, right? I want to have these, when you have a moment of vulnerable intimacy, healthy connection point with another human being, you're like, that's addictive. That's where I feel alive, because we're creatures that were created in and through relationship by a relational creator, right? And so we actually touch on the truth of our being when we hit real, vulnerable, impactful relationship, and we awaken to like, this is the condition that I was created for. And what happens is I look at, like you're talking about guys that are part of your core team, they're so hungry that they keep moving the needle forward on wanting wholeness and wanting to experience abundant life. And that in and of itself is a challenge, right? Because it's a model. Part of challenging other people is a life well lived. Like when I engage my life fully to its fullness without saying a word, my actions create a challenge to the environment around me. And it's both a challenge and an invitation. It says, do you really want to live your life in the darkness and the death that you're living out of? Because you can see this, and this feels really free over here. And then it becomes, if you want to come with me, here's my hand. We can totally keep moving that direction towards a fulfilled life.
That's so true, because, and it circles back to why I think this whole model is working. It's because it's story.
Yeah.
Because if you come in and if you meet me now, all you get to see is fruit. But if I tell you and share with you my story of where I've been, it gives hope.
Yeah. When
I sit with men that have been through great adversity and had their asses kicked and had great heartache in their life, but they're on the journey and they're getting healthy and they're getting whole and integrated, and I see their marriage and I see how they are as fathers, and I see how people around them respond. It's like, I want to be around that guy.
Yes.
I'm drawn to that man because not what he says, and it's definitely not because of what he read in a book.
Totally.
That's why we've had clinical psychologists come to our stuff and they're like, do you know what you're doing? And we're like, And he's like, this is where psychologists is where it's heading.
Yeah.
This group type of being seen and heard by your peers is like, this is where it's going. This is why this works. And we're like, We have no idea. Some freaking knuckle dragger sitting around in a barn. But we're seeing the fruit of it. We're seeing guys, marriages being restored. We're seeing guys, relationships with their adult children being restored. And it's all possible because they heard somebody else did it and they've seen it. And something happens in hope.
Yes.
Something powerful happens in hope of, what if? Well, if that guy could do it, maybe I could experience a marriage that they like each other.
Yes.
Because when people ask me, how's it going? I say, oh, it's going great. Now it's like, this is the barometer for me. My wife really likes me.
Mm.
And there's a difference between our wives liking us and loving us, right?
Yeah.
Love's kind of always on the table. Like is not often on the table.
That's real.
So it's like the fruit of all of this, Justin, is my wife really likes me.
Yeah.
Today, right now. And when I get home, my kids will hear me driving in the driveway and they will run out and jump in my arms. Mm. So you can deny all the sissy, la-la, bedwetter, emotional stuff you want. The invitation I like to say is, how's your marriage? How is your wife afraid of the man that's walking through the door?
It's good.
Is she scared? Do your kids run to you? Or do they go hide in their bedrooms when you walk in? Like, do an honest evaluation of your life. Mm. If the shoe doesn't fit, don't put it on. But relationally, this is where this stuff shows up. Like, does your wife know who's walking through the back door every night? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no, maybe take a look at this and like, maybe there's something to this.
What do you think is one of the biggest hurdles to guys doing an honest evaluation of their life?
Pride.
Yeah. Break that down. What does that pride look like internalized? Like,
I think, and it's been true for me too, is I need to be right and I need to be the man and I need my wife to be beneath me, below me. I need to be the guy. And inside, there's these terrified men with these little boys operating these full men grown bodies that doesn't know how to deal with rejection.
Yeah.
That doesn't know how to deal with not being enough. Yeah. Feeling late and behind. And so our pride says, we got to have it all together.
Or the illusion.
Well, it's the illusion, believe me. Uh-huh. And so the pride takes over. Mm-hmm. And then our need to be right all the time outweighs us choosing our kids' hearts or our wife's heart.
Yeah.
And I don't care. I just don't need to be right. It's not that important to me when I'm not choosing the things that matter more. And so I think what I've seen is really the pride thing, which why humility is our first core value.
Yes.
It's like, get low. How low? Well, if Jesus is the model, what did he do for his bride?
Yeah.
Because as men in the church, especially, we like to throw around and cherry pick these scriptures, right?
Yeah.
About our wife being subservient towards us and all this. And it's like, well, the story is lay down your life as Jesus did for his bride. Mm-hmm. And how are we showing up to our wives?
Yeah.
And believe me, I don't have this figured out, but that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal, a laid down life.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of pride, I think.
Yeah. I think that there's a scripture that talks about God giving grace to the humble, right? And there's something that I found in my own life that when pride is a resistance, right? It is, I am resisting reality.
That's a good definition.
Yeah. I am resisting the truth of what actually is. The truth that I am scared. The truth that I am dropping the ball. The truth is that I don't have all the answers. So I'm resisting reality in my pride. And I'm trying to cultivate my own sense of worthiness through my denial of my reality, right? And so when I actually engage in this sense of humility, it is me saying, I'm going to stop trying to cultivate my own sense of self-worth, right? I can't do that. I don't have the ability to cultivate my own self-worth. I can agree with a higher truth and stop berating myself and actually turn into loving myself well. But that doesn't come from all of my external actions. That comes from a knowing of the truth of my being, of where I come from, who created me, and what he has to say about me. And so I found so early on that, like, if I let go of trying to prove myself and just say, I don't know, God, like, I don't have this all figured out. I'm broken in a million ways, Dad. I really need you. There's that inflection, that overflow of grace. And that grace looks like friends that enter into my life to help me out. That looks like moments, intimate moments where someone loves on me and it repairs something inside of me. That grace looks like an encounter with God in a personal, quiet space that reveals a new truth to me. That grace is a feeling of love that overtakes me. The grace is all of a sudden not feeling alone inside of my life. And that road of humility, because each of these guys that are coming in there, they're beginning the path, or they've been on it and they're furthering it, the path of humility as they enter in. And as they enter in through humility, again, like you said earlier, they realize I am not alone in my condition. And we break that illusion of separation that we as human beings operate out of. We all live in this illusion of separation from God and from one another.
Yep.
Inside of our relationship with pride, because we tell the world we're fine. We put on plastic smiles. We're not known. We don't know anyone else. And so we create this box, this jail cell that we live in throughout our lives. And humility is the road to getting out of the abandonment, out of the aloneness, into a thriving life. And I love that you highlighted that.
Yeah, and that's why, like, at our retreats, you've got to experience this. The first thing that we do is get rid of the posturing. You are forbidden to talk about what you do for a living.
I love that.
So we're all troubadours. We're all storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And why we do that is because as men, what do we do? The first thing we do socially when we meet somebody.
This is what I do, or what do you do for a living?
What do you do for a living? That's our go-to, because we hide behind that.
Well, it feels like you said, we hide behind it. It feels scary to strike up a real conversation.
So it's interesting to see that dynamic. I mean, we plastered on every door when people are getting their badges. Like, it's very well known that you're forbidden to talk about what you do for a living, because we're like, we don't care what you do. We care about who you're becoming, and that's what this is about. And it's so cool because you see the guys, because the hierarchy starts immediately when we go down that narrative, right, of what we do for a living, because we think that's who we are. It's not who we are. It's just something we hide behind. And so it's cool to see the guy that always feels less than because maybe he is 25 and works in retail or something,
right,
versus the guy who's the CEO. Who's hiding behind that. So it just levels the playing field. And it's like, it's invitation into this authentic relationship with another man that's like, I am going to be forced to get to know who you really are. And that's what's cool. It's guys have been like, we've had older guys come and be like, I've been a deacon at this church for 25 years. And in 2 days, I know the guys in my group better than I know the men that I've been serving with for 25 years.
Yes.
Because how are we really getting to know people?
Yeah.
I think it happens in this space, or maybe at a bar at 2 a.m, and then you're regretful about maybe what you told your buddy because you're pretty sure he's going to hold it against you at some point down the line.
Yeah.
Because it's not a healthy environment to do it.
Yeah.
But that pain, that thing is trying to come out.
Yeah.
And without a safe environment for it to be fostered and cared for and cried over and anguished with and mourned with and processed with, it just is in there grinding on us all the time. And then that energy is coming out. It's coming out some way.
Yeah.
It's going to be drinking, it's going to be porn, it's going to be all the unhealthy things, or it's going to be working out or working harder or some things that are more socially acceptable.
Yeah.
But either way, it's coming out.
Yeah.
That unprocessed pain.
It'll find its way to the surface.
Yeah.
What do you think is one of the most, what are some of the things that guys are most scared of?
I think, man, a big thing is rejection.
Yeah.
I think that, they say the mother wound is the mother of all wounds. And I think that I'm seeing these patterns and these threads of sitting with men, and a lot of it is the rejection of from their wives and or
their kids,
society, and their kids, because they don't know how to be the dad that they didn't have because it wasn't modeled for them.
Yeah.
So there's this expectation of like, I should have this figured out. And it's like, at what point did we start holding ourselves accountable for something that we didn't learn?
Yes.
Like if it wasn't modeled for you, if you didn't have the perfect dad that doesn't exist, by the way,
yeah,
men are holding themselves accountable for things that aren't there. So they just give up and they avoid. We avoid when we don't know something.
Yep.
Right. So it's like, I don't know what to do with my 16-year-old and I know he's looking at porn. So I'm going to avoid it and buy him a dirt bike and
totally
instead of like, okay, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to go, again, comes back to the humility. I'm going to go to my brother, Brian Bird, who's got an 18-year-old and he's already been through this. And I'm going to get humble, and my wife and him and his wife are going to sit down and we're going to ask them questions. What did you do? When you experienced
we don't know how to do this.
We don't know how to do this. And so it's beautiful to get to be around guys that are ahead of us.
Yeah.
But as men, again, we got to have it all figured out and we got to know what to do. So we avoid.
Yeah. It's interesting. I love that you brought that up. That was one of my greatest battles early on, is I should know better. I should be able to do this.
Should have it figured out.
I should have this figured out. And it was very easy to feel like I was perpetually failing, right? Like the label that I put on myself is that I am a failure. And I think that there's a difference between I can truly fail at something and I am a failure, two different things, right? But for me, I had such a strong sense of I am a failure. And it was really debilitating in my process.
So why try?
Yeah, why try? So there was tapping out and giving up. There was getting disappointed in myself because I gave myself false expectations about where I should be and what I should be able to do. And so I lived in this perpetual disappointment of myself, of my life circumstances. And because I believed the lie that I should be able to figure this out or do this on my own, that meant I didn't have access that I need to the very thing that I needed, which was outside input in order to actually grow me out of it. And so I had to face my greatest fears. And part of those fears was the fear of rejection, the fear of looking foolish and stupid to other men, right? And that's part of the sense of rejection. We're rejecting ourselves when we don't think like we're measuring up. And then we're scared of the rejection we might feel from someone else who goes, why don't you get this? Yeah, you're right. I knew I was an idiot for this. I already felt stupid for it. You're right. I'm dumb. But it's like, that's part of the process of courage, which is where we take these wild risks into the face of fear. And we go, this guy might think I'm an idiot, but I'm going to ask him these questions. Here's what we find out usually. For the most part, when we humble ourselves and we acknowledge, I don't have it all together, and here's my vulnerable stuff, the majority of men that are on the other side of that, it tugs at heartstrings immediately inside of them, because they sit there and they go, I know exactly what that is. I've totally been there in that place of feeling inadequate. I've totally felt like I'm all alone to figure it out in my world. Yeah. There are some men that'll go, well, figure it out. I had to. I get that. They're hardened and stuff like that. But a lot of men, the heartstrings get pulled on and they go, I would love to show up for you in this.
Yeah.
How can I help participate?
So good. I spend a lot of times telling my sons, And I'll be deliberate with my little ones and get on my knees and like put my hand on their heart. And be
Yeah.
like,
Wow.
you have what it takes. It's inside of you to do these hard things as a form of initiation, because I feel like there's a lot of grown men that I spend time with and sit in these spaces that just were never told you have what it takes.
Yeah. It's a powerful statement.
You're capable of it, because to your point, they've just beaten themselves down.
Yeah.
So much that they're like, you can't give away what you don't have.
Yeah.
You can white knuckle stuff for a little while, but the truth will come out. And then it's just, what it does is it pushes men into isolation because they don't want to be exposed as the fraud that they think that they are.
Yeah.
And so that's why it breaks my heart, bro, because I just see so many good men. Because God's really given me a vision to see through all of that and to see guys and like who God created them to be. And part of, I feel like our responsibility is to find that in them and pull that out of them and like see through all the messiness and all the brokenness and all the junk and the heartache to help give the guys a vision of what your life could be.
Yeah.
And it just breaks my heart to see good men. When you get to know them, when the walls come down and you're like, oh, I know why you show up big. I know why you're hiding behind that big, all that bullshit. Like inside is this like beautiful dude who it was never modeled how to, he never got initiated. He never learned it's okay to fail or ask questions or not be the guy. And it's heartbreaking. There's like hollow men walking around doing hollow things.
Yeah.
With no purpose because they're just in survival mode. And it's like, well, no wonder the trajectory of our civilization's going the way that it is. It's like, bro, as soon as I got hooked up with you and started getting some tools and putting my life together, now me and my friends are having these conversations sitting around like, wow, what are our grandkids going to be like? But when you're in survival mode and you're just doing the best you know how to get through each day, you're not making an impact on your grandkids.
No.
But I think this is how we change the planet.
Yeah. You know,
one guy saying yes to humility. Step one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an easy step, but a hard step. Like,
oh, it's impossible. That's why guys don't do it.
It's like, I only have to do one thing, say yes to humility. But it's so difficult with all the wiring inside
and
of
the
us.
Exposure that comes along with saying,
Absolutely.
I don't know what I'm doing. And I've made a huge mess of my life and it's impossible to clean it up. So I'm just going to live behind this safe wall and live a hollow life and hope for the best. And hopefully I'll get through today.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we're getting close to wrapping up. It was making me think of my grandfather when you talked about all the walls. Once you get past all the walls, you know, my grandpa Arnie, I've talked about him in this space in the past, and there's so many things that were littered with pain because of his hard edges. But when you know his story, you see the little boy who lost his dad at 10 years old during the Great Depression, and him and his siblings and his mom almost starved to death in the middle of North Dakota. And he became the instant father trying to survive out in the middle of a farm and keep a farm going at 10 years old. Right. And then you see this little boy who's just like, I just want family. I just want connection. And the only way that I know how to guard my family and guard that connection is to become hardened. I have to be hardened or this world is going to devour me. And, you know, when I looked at the last days of my grandfather's life, as we worked through so much stuff, I was like, oh, there's the precious little boy right there. The tender kid that wants to have fun and wants to play, and said, but to go out in this world, I had to put on a suit of armor, and I had to wear that armor because that's the only, I had no father to model it. My father was dead. And the fathering that I knew It was, I'm just going to have to survive. So let me put on my armor. And like you said, when you get past, like so many times we can look at other guys and be like, oh, that guy's just an asshole. No, he's not. That guy inside feels threatened by the world around him. And he's actually a really tender, loving, playful kid at heart. And if he knew that he could lay down his armor, and if he knew that he could be safe within himself, you'd see the most beautiful expression of masculinity come out of that guy right there. And if you'll give it enough time, if you'll stand by that person's side in moments like what you're talking about, and just be present with them, they'll start revealing themselves when they feel the safety. And again, that's what you've cultivated, an environment of safety that allows us to lay down the armor that we pick up in life in order to survive this. And we realize this armor is only serving me to survive. It's not serving me to thrive.
It's good. Yeah, that's definitely a byproduct of what's come out of what we're doing with the fires is compassion is taking a hold of these guys.
Yeah.
Because of what you said. Maybe that guy's not an asshole. I don't know his story. My capacity for compassion every time I sit with these men gets enlarged. So guess what? The byproduct is I have more compassion at home. I have more compassion with my employees. I have more compassion with people that I'm like, oh, they're probably having a bad day, instead of me firing back like the fingers and all the things, right? It's like, oh, I wonder what they're going through life. So I'm seeing these marriages just by proximity get better because they're sitting with men, they're finding compassion in their own story and others, and they're going home and they're having more compassion for their families.
Yeah.
And it's like this beautiful byproduct that's happening in this space. And that's why it's beautiful and it's messy.
Yeah. That's so good, man.
Yeah.
I love us getting to have this talk.
No,
and connect great like this. I wish we could do 5 more podcasts together.
I know. It's always so fun and so easy.
I do. I look at everything you've done. I used to have my own man podcast, which you knew about. Some people may not, as they're dropping in. And there was some difficulties that happened that weren't my problem, but I did have to shut it down for the sake of protecting the integrity of the podcast. And when that went away, that shattered me in 1,000 pieces internally, because I loved the ability to speak to the masculine heart and have those exchanges. But one of the things that gave me a lot of hope in the process was even seeing like you pick up your own baton and go, hey, I'm going to run with communicating to the masculine community and form the intimate experiences that are happening and create a conversation publicly about it with the Wild Courage podcast, which I highly recommend to men go pick up and listen to and participate in that. And I highly recommend men get involved in a way of asking the question, how do I start a fire? And what does it look like to build a fire? And how do I engage this type of community? Because I'm so passionate about men getting the support that they need so that their authentic selves can show up, so that they can feel like the champions in their homes with their wives and with their kids and stuff like that. And so I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm thankful that you exist as a human being relationally with me, but I also am thankful that you exist as a person who's teaming up with the rest of your men to foster these environments as you have grace on it in the season of life.
Well, thank you. This is always an honor for me because of how big a role you've played in the redemption part of my story. And like you mentioned earlier, like the brother I never had, and that we get to jump in this fight together once in a while.
Yeah.
Back to back, swords in hand, to go advance the kingdom in this beautiful, messy space with men and their emotions and beards and snot and smokes and whiskey.
And the occasional skinny jeans that pop in.
And the occasional skinny jeans. And it's just so redemptive, all of it, all of it. And I love that God's heart is for redemption.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to look the way we think it does. and it gets to be wild, and it gets to be courageous, and it gets to be manly, and it gets to be authentic, and just to get to be a part of this. And like I said, when you shut down that podcast, the very last one was an invitation. You said, go start a podcast, go. And I feel like that was like a seed that got planted in me. It wasn't until years later that God gave me kind of the vision for what our podcast is about, stories of hope and redemption. But yeah, dude, it's an honor to get to be in your incredible space and get to lock arms with you when we have time. And I just love you so much and appreciate you.
Love you too, man.
Thank you.
For people who are watching, how you want to tell them how they can get a hold of Wild Courage or get a hold of you? Or
we just redid our website. So just go to thewildcourage.org, because we are a nonprofit. None of us make a living off this. Me and my core group of guys, we do all of this in the margins, but in that you can find the podcast, information on our retreats. And also we have a page set up for if you want to learn more about a fire, we send you information, and we do a once a month team Zoom call to equip guys to go start fires. And what we've learned, and there's no dues or fees associated with any of this. It's all just to give hope to the hopeless man is our mission and our cause. So
hope to the hopeless man. I love that. Is there a donate button there?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been so overwhelming, the amount of people that have jumped in, and with that, thank you for bringing this up, because we're a 4-legged stool now. This is the most proud thing I am of all of what we're doing, is we are sending men and paying their way to get counseling.
Come on.
Guys that can't afford good counseling, because as you know, good counseling starts at $150 an hour.
Yep.
And a lot of rural men can't afford it, don't have insurance.
Yep.
There's no way they can afford that. So with the money that people donate to us, we're putting it all back in, and we're sending people to marriage counseling we're paying for, and for guys that need to go deeper than the fire, that have deep unprocessed pain they need help with. We have people that we're sending them to and paying for it.
Yeah. And
we sponsor guys that can't afford to go to the retreats and stuff. We have sponsorship for that. So yeah, that's what we do with all the funds.
To me, that's a worthy place to put whatever we call a tithe into, because that's actually going towards fostering heaven on earth by creating transformation in people's lives.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's fun to get to steward that money, because like this trip, all of that, none of that comes out of that. None of what we do comes from that. We're very diligent in stewarding that money to going back into, because again, we believe we can change the planet with one man saying yes to this narrow path and changing his family line and trajectory of his family forever. That's how we feel like we can change the planet.
That's great. Any other way they can contact you if they need to contact you, or is that the main way?
Yeah, that's the main way. Of course, the podcast.
Wildcourage.org.
Yeah, and the podcast is on all the platforms and social media and all that.
Awesome. Last thing, hey, if you haven't smashed the subscribe button on YouTube, do that. If you're not on YouTube, go over there, subscribe, watch us on this, watch these episodes with us, and share this. Like, if you're getting impacted by the episodes with the Connected Life, please share it. Like, we're not charging anything for what we do. We just want the message to get out there. We want to see lives changed. And so that's the way that you can partner with us, is going and sharing these episodes and telling people, like, you have to watch this and listen to this.
So good.
So anyways, that's it. We're done. I'm going away. You going away?
I'm out. Peace.